In assignment 5, we're going to be learning about tone. Tone is the lightness or darkness of an object or colour. So we need to add tone to our cupcakes to really emphasise that three-dimensional quality. So first of all, I'm going to talk to you about the materials that you're going to be using. Derwent is a really good brand of shading pencils. So they come in a pack from 6B, 5B, 4B, 3B, 2B, B. So in these pencils there is a lot of graphite. So they are very soft and they're going to be darker. They get darker as they come towards the 6B. HB is a mixture of the two different types of graphite, and then H to 5H has got added clay, so this makes the pencil much harder and because of the clay a lot lighter in tone. So I'm going to just test a 5H for you to see the difference. So here I'm giving it a medium pressure, perhaps a little bit of a harder pressure on the left, and then fading that out on the right. And that one is a 5H. Now you don't need to have all of these pencils. I don't usually use the H ones too often. So if you don't have any H pencils, that's not a bother. So again, I should be seeing this one a little bit darker than the first example. There's not really much in it, to be honest, but you can feel they're quite hard pencils. Now my favourite pencils are the B pencils. So this one is a 2B and they are much softer, so you can see already the difference in the texture. So I'm not having to press too hard to create these darker tones. And finally, I'm going to just test the 6B pencil. So this has got the most graphite out of all of the different pencils. So it's much more difficult to get those lighter tones with this pencil. So you can see really how black that shadow is. Now if you're just going to get one pencil, I'd probably get a 3B or a 4B because they're going to be the most versatile. So I'm going to use this 4B to create a tonal strip. So I'm going to be starting on the left, pressing as hard as I possibly can, really building up that tone. And then as I go over to the right hand side of the page, I'm going to taper that away so it's basically just going to be the paper. I can use my blending stick in a moment to really get that nice and soft. So this technique is called a gradient. So you really need to be able to draw a gradient confidently so that you can apply it on your cupcake. So this that I'm using is a blending stump. So this is made out of paper, really compacted down. It really helps to push all the graphite into the tooth of the paper. So you can kind of see the paper showing through, and this just pushes it in and really builds up that tone a lot darker. Now you will find it will pull some of the graphite off, particularly in the darker areas. So they will get dirty and you can just clean it with a little bit of sandpaper. So the way you use this is tilting it on the side so that it is in line, touching from left to right or up and down. So if you need to create something like icing with a really smooth texture, that is the technique for you. Now other techniques that we might need to use is a technique called hatching. So this is a bit more textural. So just imagine this is my cupcake base. So I might need to put in lines so they can be straight, they can be curvy, to create that corrugation. So typically that is what a hatching line is. So it is a straight repetitive line. Obviously we're not so neat, we're not doing a graphic drawing, so you can layer these. They don't have to be neat and tidy. So a nice thing to do once you've done that is to just soften the edges a little bit with your blending stump. So this would be called hatching. Next we can do a technique called scumbling. So this is basically really small type of scribbling. You can press harder, you can press lighter. So this might be used as well with your pencil on the side to create the texture of the cake. And finally we've got a technique called stippling. So this is when we add little dots and dashes. The closer you put them together, the darker it's going to appear. So this is good for just small areas where you want it to look more textured. So you need to make sure you are using the correct pencil. So if you're going to get a couple of pencils, maybe get a H pencil and a B pencil, because you're going to be able to get the full range of tones. You need to practice shading from light to dark in a smooth way. You might have to have several tries, and then you need to be able to do a little bit of texture. Now once you've got all those techniques really good, you can apply it to a cupcake drawing. So I'm just going to quickly sketch out the way we have done it several times before, just a generic cupcake. Okay, so when you're working from an object, you need to make sure that you've got a light source coming from one direction. This is going to make it much easier for you to create a three-dimensional effect. So here I'm going to illustrate with the sun or the light on the left hand side. So that is going to mean that my cupcake is going to be darker on the right, so the gradient's going to be flipped, darker on the right and lighter as it gets towards the light. So it's also going to affect it from above, so it might get darker as it comes down to the bottom. So if we're going to apply it to this drawing, we would be sketching in the darkest tones on the right hand side. In the middle it's going to be the medium tones, and then on the left hand side we're basically just going to use a little bit of shading. So the reason we use shading and tone in a drawing is to really emphasize those 3D qualities. So every object has to be treated the same, whether it's the case, the cake, the icing. So it's going to be darker on the right and lighter on the left. And then there's going to be a few details and a few bits of tone in different places as well. Now a slightly more advanced technique would be to add a cast shadow. So where the shadow is falling on the table, it might be to add a plate. If you're going to add a background, you're going to need to do a technique called chiaroscuro, where you add a lighter tone where it's dark, and then perhaps a darker tone where it's light, to really help that stand out. And you can blend it between light and dark in the centre to blend that in. So that is really going to help you to create a three-dimensional effect. Now it's a good idea if you're going to work from a photograph to print it out in black and white, because that's going to help you to be able to see the tones. So if we look at this, I'd be using a 4B pencil in the shadows, perhaps a 2B pencil for most of this tone, and H pencils perhaps for some of this icing and the background. So you can think about what tones would be suitable. So have a go in your sketchbook to produce a page just exploring tone and texture.